it's interesting because recently lawyers who we'd regard as one of the most educated professionals, they're undergoing the moral challenge because they've proposed to incorporate into businesses so they can pay less tax. I don't know if people have followed papers recently. So people say, even though lawyers are one of the most educated sectors there is, we're also one of the least trusted in some respects as well. But I think it's a case of, if you look at doctors, obviously there's a lot of training to go into doctors. Obviously accountants, people say, oh, you're an accountant, it's a trusted profession. Nurses is also a trusted profession, I think most people would agree with. And I think it's that people see it as a commitment, people see education, well, if you've gone to university or you've done all this education, well then you've got a commitment to your own standard. And I think there's a link there between higher standards as a result of education and also higher personal standards as well, because those who are more highly educated tend to have higher personal standards.
I think there's an extension of that. It comes to the subject matter. At the end of the day, we're talking about people's financial lives, and we're talking about, you know, some people have built a lot of wealth, some people haven't built as much, and it's often sometimes the smaller amounts of wealth that it's more integral that we get it right, because that's really all they've got to deal with. And I think because of the nature of what we're dealing with, there's a fundamental principle or a belief that education has to be that minimum standard that demonstrates a level of professionalism, and then it's the experience, and then it's the behaviours and the ethics that sit on top of it. So my view around why education's become almost the rock around professionalism for our industry is because our entry standards in the past have been quite low, and that the what you're dealing with is people's financial futures and security, and it's the nature of that really drives people to link to the education piece as the pillar of having a professional view.
So I think Linda's quite right. I think the reason why education has been highlighted is because we started from a very low base, which is RG 146, which I think everybody around this table would acknowledge, you know, has been too low historically, so the baseline needs to be an approved degree and then certification and years of experience and supervised experience, and that's the baseline for a profession. And because, as we sit here today, we haven't got 100% of financial planners in that framework, the professional framework, which has, you know, at its heart education and certification, but it also has a professional framework around ethics and standards and practice standards. Because everybody is not there, what the community is saying and consumers are saying, we want people to be there as a starting point, not an end point, but a starting point. And that's why I think we need to get there very quickly as an industry and evolve into a profession, and then we can have discussions in a more realistic way around, you know, the quality of advice at that higher level and the ethical framework of how you engage a client. But until we get there, you know, the community at large and legislators and regulators are saying we want, you know, education is critically important because we haven't kind of reached that starting point.
There's a point I'd like to raise there that education and examination of ethics doesn't guarantee ethical behaviour.
Of course.
And if you look at the features of other professions, it's the regulation, the monitoring, and occasionally the execution of people who are not complied with those ethical standards that enforces the ethics across the industry.